Grammy-winning musician's unique guitar style earned him a number of hits in the 1950s and 1960s, as well as the nickname the King of Twang. Well, his career spanned over 7 decades and influenced artists like Bruce Springsteen and George Harrison. Martin Simpson is a singer-songwriter who's inspired by Dwayne.
I was very fortunate to meet him. He was over here in 2011, and he made, I believe, his last record, produced by my friend Richard Hawley. And Dwayne he was such an extraordinarily nice human being, as well as being really one of the complete progenitors of the electric guitar as a larger thing in society. He was playing big gigs, but he also played at my local pub, which is the Greystones here in Sheffield, which stands 200 people and seats 110, sort of thing. He was, to start with, I think, the first guitar hero. There weren't people like him at that point. Nobody had heard these big sounding instrumental records. I mean, it was really before surf. He had a massive influence on, for instance, Hank Marvin, who became a massively influential guitar player over here. But if you think about what Hank Marvin did, in many ways, Duane Eddy is the obvious inspiration for that. So, the electric guitar is now the biggest instrument in the world. And one of the people that started that was Duane. He was playing a really beautiful 1950s Gretsch Chet Atkins guitar, which has a really extraordinary sound on its own. But then that sound was run into a very big amp with lots of bass response. And he played on the bass strings. And his producer, Lee Hazelwood, he had an enormous water tank which he used as an echo chamber. And so part of the charm of that guitar sound is the fact that it was recorded in a water tank.
And that was Martin Simpson there on Duane Eddy. This is the BBC World Service, and in the forum,
better plants, better plant food, better farming techniques. Throughout history, there have been huge leaps in agricultural productivity, innovations which now help to feed a planet of 8 billion people.
We've seen enormous advances in food production at a time of exploding global population.
We'll be discussing the scientific breakthroughs in the middle of the last century. It was called the Green Revolution, and it's credited with saving hundreds of millions of people from starvation.
We have enough stock now. So if there is a drought, that drought doesn't turn into a famine. I have not seen in my living years famine in India.
But with the incredible successes also came unintended consequences.
The forum, feeding the world and the Green Revolution, at bbcworldservice.com/forum or wherever you get your BBC podcasts.
Next, we're in Sweden, which has become a European hotspot for the super rich.
Overnight, I had almost $10 million on my bank account. I was definitely sure I would reach nirvana.
I'm Maddie Savage, and I'll be finding out how a country with a reputation for championing equality became a breeding ground for billionaires. And I'll be meeting some of Sweden's new super rich to see how they've made and spent their money. That's on the documentary right after the news.
BBC News with Neil Nunes. Hundreds of pro-Palestinian protesters have remained on the campus of the University of California in Los Angeles, despite police orders to leave. Demonstrations against the war in Gaza are continuing at universities across the United States. A United Nations expert says evidence gathered by the BBC suggests the killing of a Palestinian boy by Israeli soldiers in the occupied West Bank was a potential war crime. Israel says the circumstances of the child's death in November are under review. One of Britain's top computer scientists has warned that it's too late to prevent artificial intelligence from being misused to influence this year's elections in the UK and the US. Professor Wendy Hall said voters needed to be wary of deep fakes of politicians online. China looks set to maintain its influence on the Solomon Islands after the election of a new prime minister.